Hey everyone, welcome to episode 111 of BIM After Dark Live. Some of you may have heard Twinmotion 2024 preview has been released, so you start to see some of the new features. If you haven't, go check that out. But if you also haven't, then check out this episode. I've got a guest and we're going to be talking about some of the new features and demoing them and some of the really neat things that are coming out in Twinmotion 2024. So with all that, let's roll it and we'll get into the episode. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us live today. If you're here Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, thank you for joining. This is a weekly live stream where we talk about BIM, Revit, and pretty much any adjacent technologies to architecture, engineering, and construction industry. If you're here live, definitely ask questions in the chat. I will be checking it out throughout the entire episode, and I will be feeding it into the conversation as needed. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. We are running into about 88,000 subscribers with the goal of hitting 100,000. So make sure if you like this stuff to give it a subscribe and a thumbs up, and hopefully we can get there to be only the second YouTuber to hit 100,000 with a Revit channel. That'd be kind of cool. And yeah, we got some returning visitors. We got the Revit Kings here. David's here from the community. Well, hey, David. Junior Thompson's back from down in Jamaica. What's going on? A lot of returning guys. I love seeing you guys in the chat. So feel free to ask questions as we go along in this conversation. But I'm excited to jump into it. You guys know how much I love Twinmotion. And so I'm excited to bring on a guest who also loves Twinmotion. And we're going to be talking about some of the new features. So with that being said, let me make sure your audio is on, Tyler. Tyler Puryear, welcome to the show. How's it going, man?
Thank you very much for having me. Doing well. How are you yourself?
I'm doing good. Keep my energy up at 9 p.m. on Thursdays.
Yeah. Workers.
It is. It's always been great, but with two kids and long days, it's starting to get harder and harder to stay awake past the 10 p.m. mark, but we're good. I'm good.
They keep you on your toes.
Yes. I will also talk about Twinmotion all the time because I'm a huge fan of the software, and anyone who's followed the channel knows that I am. So before we do jump into that, though, maybe this is your first time on the show, I should say. So thank you for joining, and maybe give everyone here in the audience a little overview of who you are and what you do and how you came about to coming on to BIM After Dark Live.
Yeah, of course. Again, my name is Tyler Puryear. I practice architecture in Tennessee full-time, but sort of in my nightlife, I work for Epic Games and do a few things with the Twinmotion developers off and on. And so a lot of what I do on my off time is sort of handle a lot of tutorial-based things. Mainly right now, you'll just see it landscape-based, but I'm kind of trying to branch out and do some more Twinmotion-based things because I really love this program. And so I just had to dive in and shoot you a message and try to be on here. I've been part of the community in the chat for quite a while, and I've always wanted to be on here to at least show something.
Well, I appreciate that. I have no problems talking about Twinmotion, so I'm always welcoming a guest who's also willing to talk about it. So, that's awesome. Great, thanks again for joining. And again, everyone, feel free to ask questions in the chat. I will keep an eye on it as we go. So I know we have a lot of content to cover, so I think today we'll just jump right into it. Twinmotion 2023 has been out for over a year now, with a couple different releases and hot fixes, and there was some pretty big features that were introduced in 2023. 2024 has sort of built on to that. And so I think maybe what we can do is just first maybe talk about, I guess, your experience with the relationship between Revit and Twinmotion and some of the things that you've seen over the last year or two of maybe improvements, maybe non-improvements, some of your workflows that you would suggest versus maybe some of the workflows that other people are using.
Yeah. Well, prior to Twinmotion's existence, I had to get really used to exporting certain file types so that they could be imported into Unreal Engine 4 at the time. So I had no idea about Twinmotion till probably till Epic acquired them. And so I think recently, especially since Autodesk and Epic kind of had, or they still have a sort of connection with working together.
Strategic partnership,
partnership,
whatever that means.
So
Yeah.
essentially, what that entails is if you have the AEC package, Twinmotion was already a part of that. Now, in this current release, you can basically get it for free up to a certain point. I think there's a certain threshold where if your company is making over a certain amount of money, or depending on what it is, what your output is, you can use the program for free straight through the Epic Games launcher. And so before, when I first started using Twinmotion, I could definitely tell that getting things from Revit to Twinmotion was a little bit cumbersome at first, because they didn't have the plugin right away. You kind of had to go through a roundabout way to exporting via Datasmith, which is still a thing. Or exporting things like IFC, or exporting DWG to open it up into something else like Blender or CAD in order to convert that to an FBX or OBJ so it's usable. But I think ever since they had the Datasmith team kind of really pipeline the program, it made the transition quite smooth. And now it's really easy just to swap the model straight from Revit into Twinmotion and go to town.
Yeah, I think the conversion to FBX was the start when they had an FBX exporter for us, at least in Revit. That was sort of the start of it, right? That was before the Autodesk connection. But the Datasmith, in my opinion, it's been a transition, but it's been a very welcome one. If anyone has messed with importing the Datasmith files, you realize how much of that information is coming in and how useful it's becoming on the Twinmotion side, which is great. So that brings me to my first question as far as workflow. There's been a huge push on the marketing side of it to use direct link and connecting the direct connection, whatever it's even called. I don't even know what it's connect between Revit and Twinmotion, which gives you that sort of real-time connectivity. Maybe I'll give you let you answer it first before I give my opinion on sort of like, what has your workflow been? Have you been using direct link? Do you find that valuable or not?
I definitely find it valuable to an extent. When I'm starting a new project for the first time, doing the direct link is very useful, going back and forth. However, which is one of the things I was wanting to talk about today, was how to take advantage of still using Datasmith files. So sometimes, for example, especially if you have different software between Revit or SketchUp or whatever it is, they all have, Twinmotion has broadened the types of files that it'll import. But with Datasmith files, what I'll do is, especially with Revit, is I'll assign, say, an existing phase to a Datasmith file, or new construction phase to a different Datasmith file. And that way, there's not any weird overriding issues that sometimes direct linking can cause. If, for example, one of my team members changes something in a Revit model and that's not reflected correctly, and I go to update the direct link, some models at times can kind of be a little shifty, especially when it comes to foliage. Will sometimes not want to adhere to where you had adhered before. Particularly grass. If you change a landscape in Revit or in something else, and then you decide to move it completely messes up sometimes. Yeah,
I mean, the way I equate that is to like hosted, like face hosted objects in Revit. If you mess with the face, what happens to it? This is now a face hosted object that's like this, and it's like thousands of objects. So no, I think I appreciate your opinion and input, and I think it's kind of where I was going with it too, is and I want to bring that up because I always get that question, and that seems to be the biggest confusion for folks learning Twinmotion is honestly, the direct link is a little clunky in the sense of not understanding what's happening. It's hard to understand, well, where's my file going? How is it connected to this Twinmotion file?
Yeah.
What happens when I open Twinmotion without opening Revit? And where's that file and that whole thing? And then obviously what you're saying there is if you're controlling design options, or if you want to have the site different from the building and all these other things, then you pretty much only have to do Datasmith. So me personally, I actually don't use direct link really at all.
Yeah.
I just export Datasmith. To me, it's going to view, export Datasmith, and then just refreshing in Twinmotion is the same as going to refresh
Exactly.
data link and go in. It's really not that. The only difference is now now I have a file location of the export. If I want to do design option 2, I can do it. If I want to separate the site from the building, which is a huge, I highly suggest doing that because of what Tyler was talking about. If your building changes 1,000 times, your site might only change once. You're not dealing with the potential of blown crap up, and so to speak. So I'm glad you said that. I think that's something, because there's this huge, like, when you read the other than being free, one of the big pushes with the partnership between Autodesk and Epic has been this direct link technology. And personally, I just don't think it's there yet. It's not.
Yeah.
There's something about it that's just not quite user friendly, I think is what it comes down to. So my suggestion would also be to use Datasmith files. There was somebody in the comment while you're chatting saying that they haven't used Twinmotion before and asking about the comparison between Enscape and Twinmotion. I'm not going to get into that in this video. I have other videos about that. I just don't want to take a ton of time on it. All I will say is that they both should exist, and you should both use them both. The great thing is now Twinmotion's free, so you can pay for Enscape if you want. You don't have to choose between the two. but you go. I'll link the videos below. I think I did a video on exactly this topic, so I will link that video below. All right. So this is what we're gonna do. We'll take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll jump right into the 2024 new features, and then we'll start highlighting some of the new features and talking about what's new within it. But before we do that, I did want to take a moment to mention our sponsor for this episode, which is the BIM After Dark community.
Hi, my name's Jerry Pascucci. I'm the BIM manager at Irwin and Layton. I've joined the community to learn some extra tips and tricks. Been working in Revit since 2010. I've been attached to Revit for a long time, always trying to push the envelope, learn more, do more, get more out of it. For Irwin and Layton, I do a lot of project coordination using Navisworks. When you announced that you were starting the community, I was really excited about that. I've been subscribed ever since you started the community. I feel like it's just a great resource to have, between just getting answers from you, also having the entire community to be able to answer questions as well. Training tutorials I watch over and over again. They're just a great resource to have. And on top of that, all of the template files and sample files. At one point I had a question, how to make a jack arch. And I reached out, Jeff provided me with a video, and I couldn't get the pattern to align along the arch. With Jeff's video and additional help, I was able to get this jack arch to be modeled in there perfectly.
So you heard it there from Jerry. Head on over to community.bimafterdark.com if you're interested in becoming a member. We actually have an office hour tomorrow, so if you sign up tonight, you can join our office hour tomorrow with me and a bunch of members. Come see what it's all about. There's a lot of cool things going on in there, and I definitely think you'll enjoy yourselves, and I'll enjoy meeting you guys. So again, it's community.bimafterdark.com. We have a couple members here too. Actually, David commented before. He's over in Australia, so he's enjoying Friday morning while we're enjoying Thursday night. All right, so let's jump in Make sure your audio is on. So I think what we'll do is I'll let you decide what order of the new features you want to talk about, Tyler. With in no particular order, but I think maybe however you want to go about it. I think maybe we'll start and run through a few of the features, and then again I can show your screen. So maybe we'll start with what's your favorite new feature so far that you're seeing in the 2024 preview?
All the procedural tools.
Oh, what do you mean by that?
Well, so with 2024, one of the new transitions that they did was they moved from Unreal Engine 5.3 to 5.4. What came with that was a whole new upgrade to Lumen in general, but what also came with that is procedural content generation. I don't know if anyone has seen or messed with Unreal Engine 5.4, because that's a whole different topic, but they have this thing called PCG, which stands for procedural content generation. So if you were to say, I want to procedurally place an object on anything, whether it's the landscape or a box or a wall, you can choose that, and you can say, hey, I want to add these 5 or 6 objects to this surface. But I want to scatter, the term scatter, those objects either in a certain pattern or grid pattern or completely randomly to be natural. So with that, let me just move over here. This project. So we're used to, I guess I'm showing myself right now, aren't I?
No, we're seeing Twinmotion right now.
No, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, so let me turn off G here. So if I were to zoom out, you can see that all this landscape has sort of a border around it. And we all know in the populate and place tab.
Hold on, Tyler. Before we move forward, it's a little laggy on my end. Maybe stop sharing for a quick second and share share via the video optimization in Zoom. There's a little check box when you go to share screen.
Yeah.
Let's see if that helps.
Yeah.
I see it when you stop. Just when you're moving, it's pretty laggy. So I'm assuming it's
yeah.
going to be laggy for everyone else.
And I want to say that it's probably this particular file.
Well, it could be that too. If it's laggy on your end, then that's definitely going to be laggy on our end, right?
It's laggy on my end because this particular project is quite hefty. All right. If I move around this, does this look smoother to you?
It's a little better, but it's still a little choppy. So maybe
Okay.
let's stop share, and then if you reshare with there's a little checkbox in Zoom for optimized video, that might help. But just when you're going to share, there's a checkbox there that says
go to share.
I think so, yeah. It says optimized for video
Optimized
content.
for
Yeah.
video.
Let's see if that helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
I should have mentioned that before, sorry.
No, it's fine.
All right. Let's see. Let me make sure you guys are still seeing him now. Sorry about that, everyone. Perfect. All right. That's a little better. Okay.
A little better.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I'll try not to do any bird flying. This doesn't really require a whole lot of movement right now.
All good. All good. Okay. So procedural placement. Let's see what that looks like.
All right. So we're used to going to populate to place things like shrubs or objects and place, and we're used to paint, and so we can drag things like bushes. Let's just use this bush for example, and I've already messed up. There we go. So, and we're used to this function, right? So instead of doing that, we could use this new one over here that's called spacing and area. So spacing is essentially like going to place everything on a spline. So you can see if I zoom in here, there's a little orange orb right where my cursor is. So I'm going to click. And as I'm clicking, you can see I'm just basically going to create a spline. And I right click and it deselects that spline. So every single one of these little upside down arrows is considered a node point, or a piece of information such as an object could be placed there. If I wanted to, over here in the properties panel on the right, if I want to increase this count number, so there's 10 arrows, I can increase this to something like 41, and now they'll procedurally place evenly along this path. I can grab a node. If I were to select a node here, I can move it around, select this node, move it around, and they all move procedurally. So this is the procedural content generation. We can also do it by distance if we want to say we have a node every 3 meters, or for my American side, I should obviously put this in feet so I don't confuse myself. I should make that a default.
Yeah.
Always go to my units. So we can decide what object we want on this spline. So I'm going to use that same bush base, put it in an asset, and now it populates everywhere where one of those nodes are. We can also select each individual object, whatever it is, and choose, just like you would with the paintbrush, you can choose a random scale for each one of these objects, random rotation, which I would always, even if you're using the paintbrush, always use probably 100% on random rotation, so it doesn't look like super repetitive. And this random rotation offset is similar, but it's going to be a little different. But random, let's see, scale offset, we can make it super huge or super small. But the big one here is how we want these objects to be distributed naturally or unnaturally on the spline. So we can do random order of different things. So this random lateral offset, right now, what that means is all these objects are going to adhere to the spline right on the spline. So if we wanted to increase this slider, you can see it's expanded the boundary of this spline sort of threshold. And we can increase even more. Let me do by count and increase this count. So if you had a string of bushes that you wanted to be in order, but not paint, because sometimes going into the paintbrush to erase an area and repaint an area can be, I think, a little daunting sometimes.
Yeah.
This is also really handy if we used man-made objects. So if we go to city objects and street lamps, let's use this one, and let's just make a straight line and right click. And now we have a string of street lamps in a very specific order.
Placing cars in parking lots.
Exactly.
On a curve in a parking lot. Oh my God.
So I am glad you mentioned that, because that's the next thing I wanted to show you.
I think I have a video from like 2 years ago about how I did that in Revit as a placeholders, because it was so frustrating to manually do the placement of things on an angle there.
And then getting an object from Revit like a car to look correctly in Twinmotion is not so fun.
Yeah. Actually, so what I was doing was making just a block in Revit, exporting as a Datasmith file, doing a replace in Twinmotion, but then that was it, right? Because now once you replaced it, it was placed there, and they were just individual objects. So it worked, but it was pretty awful.
The problem with that is when you went to go move said object, you had to re-replace it sometimes.
You'd have to re-import it, replace it,
replace it.
All right, and also delete the other ones.
Yes. So in that regard, let's do vehicles. But this time I'm going to, instead of using spacing, which is great. So if you have a parking lot in a line, you could say, I want, and we know what the parking spacing is, 8 feet, 9 feet, 10 feet, depending on what the city ordinances are. And so you can set a car every so often, and then you can individually select, I think, each item, and then not, remove it on the spline.
Nice.
Don't quote me on that. I haven't done that, but I think I've seen somebody do that. But alas, the other area of populate is this area option here. So this is where, if you're used to PCG and Unreal Engine 5, this is where it really comes from. So I'm going to just do a square here. And you can just see how it snaps to that corner there. And now all the arrows are randomly ordered. If we were to do this path tension here, it's going to say we want those corners to be tightened up to a more of a 90-degree angle instead of a spline. It'll be more like a polyline. So if I were to put this at 0%, it's going to really make it smooth, but 100% just makes a pure square. And then spacing, we can add more, but this random spacing is what really is going to be fun with cars. Let's not randomize it. You can see they're all in a pretty much a grid. Probability states how often a node is placed in a given area. So it's sort of the chance that one of these nodes is going to be placed. Probability of 0 means nothing. So 100 completely fills every possible spot. So now, since you mentioned it, well, let's put a car in there.
Nice.
Maybe the spacing isn't quite. Let's do spacing of 12 feet. So obviously these cars are touching each other, but there's also a value that we can do, remove the probability, maybe increase the spacing a little bit. So there we go. Now we can have a parking garage that is a little bit of variety. We can add more cars. So if you add more vehicles or more items to this list, the probability settings in this scattering box here is going to be the same. You're just, the variety of what the item is going to be different.
Right.
And again, you can go in and choose each one of these assets individually, scroll down, and then it says settings per object. So if I want the scale of this one car to be super huge,
oh, nice. And it'll change all of them within. I was just going to ask that. If you wanted to like rotate the card, you have to select them individually, but it does it by type. That's really neat.
Yeah, it does it by type. Yeah. So you can do this, again, random rotation just ever so slightly because, some people can't park straight. I don't think I selected that setting. Yeah, there we go. So that's one use of it. The other use is obviously vegetation or anything. I like to use the spacing tool for fences or guardrails. So if we were to go to, I'm forgetting where it was, city, or even bollards, this is nice. So let's place some bollards in here. And we can space these bollards.
Is there a limitation to what you can use these tools for as far as types? I can use them for imports as well as like Sketchfab or Quixel. Like, is there limitations to what you can populate?
I don't believe so. I think it takes any sort of mesh object, any OBJ, FBX. Let me go ahead and just go and download something like let me go something from the Megascans library, download this wooden palette. Perfect. So let's now see if this will object creation. There it is.
Nice.
So anything, that's lovely.
No, that's cool. Yeah.
Perfect.
Because that was the other thing too, right? With scatter and some of the other tools, they were kind of limited. I believe I'm not sure how much they were anymore, but they were limited to some only specific. Some of the other populate tools were limited to vegetation or cars or whatever, right? So that's kind of what I was wondering, because this would be also like for imports, like if you had a custom model of something that you downloaded or created in Blender or Revit, right, and you just exported it, can you make sure that you can pull that in?
One thing that a lot of people, and I'm sure you know this, that don't know, since scatter is very, you have to click it a few times to kind of get the density that you want, especially with detailed grass. So if I were to go ahead and do this and click this once, I can click it many, many times to get the same thing. Or I could literally just add this grass to the collection multiple times, and everything's gonna stack. So if I now go and select every one of these and then use the scatter tool, it's really gonna populate faster.
Right. Yeah.
So and you can see that they have sort of a roadmap, and one of the features that they're working on is a grass-based material. So I don't really exactly know how it works or how it's going to work. It's under development, but the roadmap, from what I would guess, is it's material-based. So you apply just a grass material, and you say, hey, I want this grass to be populated with this actual physical grass, then it will just do it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that'll be nice. I mean, and I always suggest to people when it comes to the grass side of it is, before we had this tool now where we can paint, or not even paint, we can select area and place by that. It was always making sure that you had materials set up so you didn't just play your entire topography with grass. Maybe you do like a sub-region or whatever it's called now in subdivision in 24 and 25. Maybe closer to your building and stuff that's grass, but then the rest is a different material, so you can just apply materials. Because you may not want, you don't need necessarily the grass on the entire, especially if you have this giant topography. But this is helpful now because now instead of using scatter, you can use the area tool and place it, that way sort of thing. So.
Yeah, so the area tool does work with grass, but again, it's not super. You're having to choose an optimization thing here. So if I were to try and do grass, it's not going to work for detail grass. See, it's red, but it will work for. Nope. Let me select that. It will work for the other types of grains.
And I'm sure if you stack it, it probably would do the same. Potentially,
yeah. Eventually, well, if you stack it, that's the thing. The stacking. So since the stacking only works on the scatter.
Okay.
So the area is what's within this box to scatter, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's only going to place that on the nodes that were previously defined by the area settings. So these spacing settings here, if I wanted to select this area here. Oh yeah, asset properties. Let me update that seed. All right, so path retention, spacing. So if I wanted to say I want all of these to be super close, you just reduce the spacing, and it does increase that. So it's sort of an optimization thing.
Right.
If you're far away, or if you're at a low camera angle, you don't have to have that entire thing completely full of grass, especially if you're on a system or a computer system that's not able to handle that very well. So if you wanted to add more density to this, because there is a limitation right here, it won't let me go below almost 3.5 feet. However, you can copy the area. You can duplicate the area.
Copy and paste it or whatever.
Go ahead and if I wanted to, if I can get my buttons to work. Yeah, let's just copy this area. There we go. So it's here twice, and then we can change. Here's the other thing. They've added this seed value. And so if we wanted to change the seed value of this area, you see that it's now changed. It's stacking the densities on top of each other. So I can add a couple more areas and then have a different seed value for each area.
Yeah.
And now what was one area is now 4, and we've just stacked that effect. So that's another way you can completely do it.
That works. That's neat. Cool. So that's awesome. So spacing and area. So that's the generation. There was a question in the chat about animated FBXs and animated objects coming in. I know that was something that there's been chatter about within. I don't remember if it's in the preview or the talk, but I know on the roadmap it's been there for a while. Do you know anything about the development of animated objects coming in?
Let me look at the roadmap real quick to make sure that I'm not gonna say anything.
I was just gonna say we gotta be careful which parts we're supposed to talk about or not. But I'm pretty sure there's something on the roadmap for animated FBXs, but maybe not.
Yeah,
animated objects.
There's already animation to a degree, and I think most of it is Twinmotion based. And I want to say that there is under construction. They're working on exactly that.
Yeah.
I know animation is a very important thing. It's a high priority. So you can almost, if it's not in, because I don't really dive into animation a whole lot. So if it's not in the preview, then you can probably guarantee it that it's going to come in at some point in time.
Yeah. On that note, I guess it's a good transition into another feature, which I'm not sure if you're planning on talking about this or not, but I do know that there was some updates on the video paths, animation control, some of the triggers and the animators and all of those good things. I'm not sure how much of that you want to dive into, but I do know that anyone who has done, whether it's videos or I guess videos are where it comes into play, but if you use the animators, so they have animators for rotation and movement, and even when you're using like path of humans that are walking, for example. There's always been an issue about sort of being able to control how much control you had over that, and then even keyframing video and stuff like that. So I'm not sure if you want to expand on that. I know that there's been some updates in 24 for that.
Yes, there have. Most of those updates have been because with the transistor translators.
I couldn't. I was animators, translators. That's what I meant.
Translators, yeah. You had me twisted there.
Yeah.
So with rotators, you assign an action to a rotator, and you assign an action to a translator. So the translator is moving from one direction to another in a straight line, and a rotator is obviously rotating said object. The new feature that has come out is being able to nest those together. So if you wanted to nest you see here, a rotator or translator within one another. So if while it's rotating, it's also moving in a straight line, so it looks a little different. You can totally do that. Again, I haven't really messed with these a whole lot. You can do all sorts of different things with assigning rotators and translators to objects. And so that's the main thing, but you can also control these by a seed, I believe, within this sequencer that we're going to be talking about. So that's the whole thing with the camera stuff that I was wanting to touch on.
Yeah, sure. Let's jump into it. Yeah. Sequencer. That's the word I was looking for as well on the camera.
So one thing with populate, though, if we were to say make a path, a character path of something, you know how whenever you go to export and render something, every time you render the type of people or the amount of people is always different every time.
Yep, whether it's a still or a video, and that's always been frustrating to people. I get it.
One thing that you can do now is see this where it says this random seed. You can assign a specific seeds and link that seed to different sequences, and so that within each camera frame, if you have multiple camera frames, the sequence of that seed is going to be this identical each time. And you can change the seed. So this is one of the things that they've added is the ability to match that seed. So if you wanted to have another path somewhere else and you like this particular seed of people, you can just copy that seed, plug it in to the other path, and it'll be almost identical.
And you can assign that seed to a camera sequence so that if you had 4 different cameras, it would always be the same seed type of thing. So
yes, I haven't tried that particular one yet. What I have done is the fun aspect of making cameras just do way more than you can do before. All right, so in the media panel, we're always used to going to the video tab here and then creating a frame, moving your camera over here, creating a frame, and then setting how long that is, whether it's 10 or 20 seconds, and then press play. And you can change the ambience and physicality of things from camera to camera. But now there is sequencer. If I were to quit media mode here, sequencer is obviously taken from the terminology of Unreal Engine 4 and 5. So let's go ahead and click to add a camera here above this grassy parking lot. And now you can see the whole sequence in an actual time frame. If we wanted to say, hey, we want this to be 30 seconds, it's going to extend that to be 30 seconds. And then I'm going to let's just go over here. And then let's move my timeline halfway, then go over here. And we can hit the plus icon to add a still frame there. Let's move it to about 27 seconds. Zoom in really into this car and add a still frame here. So now we can physically see the path within the sequencer. And on top of that, what's nifty is, how sometimes whenever you do different media type or different cameras in the media, it doesn't feel as smooth of a transition as you want. Right now, you can do this smooth speed.
Oh, nice.
If I were to press this, it didn't really move them a whole lot. Let me, let's see. Let me move this one right here, and I'll do something crazy. add a camera here. So now when we press play, it does a really weird path just like that. So let's do smooth speed again. All right, now you see it spaced all of those out. That's just going to ensure that whenever you go to play, it's a little bit more smooth from frame to frame. And I think there's more features that are going to come to Sequencer, and this is just a start. One nifty thing is this icon right here is sort of like it says media preview, but if you're used to Unreal Engine, you know this as a picture-in-picture view, and you can see the spline of your camera's path, which is nifty.
That's
and
neat, yeah.
if you want to select that path on this, so I'm selecting this frame in the sequencer, you can see now it's got the transform controls. If I think, well, I want this camera to be a little bit lower, just lower it along the path, and then update the camera's position, and it'll update the spline, and now you can see the little preview in the bottom right and the spline along with the cameras following along.
Neat. And so that's a separate media mode now, though. That's not under the video mode, right?
It's a completely separate media mode. So the media mode is still going to be there, but right now they've added sequencer because there's going to be far more things that come to this.
Yeah, I was going to say, it says camera track, so it looks like you can potentially stack medias on top. Or, I mean, I'm not sure if you can do that now, but...
There's, I know you can stack the rotators and translators within this mix. If you want a certain action to take place at 5 seconds and you want it to last all the way to 16 seconds, depending on what that rotator or translator settings are.
That's what I'm thinking of.
You can move it left or right on the timeline, so to speak.
I think that's exactly what I was thinking of, because anyone who has used the translators or animators in the past may know that basically. And I think you're actually, can you zoom into them maybe real quick so everyone can see your animators over there, your translators, whatever
these little guys.
So notice how it's just looping. So you didn't have a ton of control over that in the past. You could do it by a trigger, which means like you got close to it, or it just did it once in like the beginning of the frame. But basically you would be dealing with this thing that was just looping and hoping to God that you had it at the right time when you did like an export or a live scene, right? And so that's huge for anyone who's used them, because now you can say start the animator here and the animator here. So if you're walking into a door, for example, you can have it open and close. If you want a car to move, during the driveway when you're like only at this part of the video, then you can say, okay, at this part of the video, move the car. So to me, that's a huge bonus to trying to do movies within Twinmotion.
Oh yeah. Exactly. So, cool. And it's really neat. So we could also, within this, last thing I can say about the sequencer here is to add a whole new camera spline path. You just you go down to the end here, or really you don't have to go down to the end. You hit this icon. I don't really know what this one called. Snapshot. Oh, never mind. Let's go to. No, never mind. That one's not. Never mind. I messed something up. I thought it would add. I'm still getting used to it too. Oh wait, here it is. Never mind. Wrong side of the
Action
thing.
Cam 2.
Yeah, so Action Cam 2. So that's what all of these cameras are called, is Action Cams. And speaking of cameras, one really neat thing is camera types. So let me get out of this mode here. Let's go up to this particular camera here. So before, when you do types of cameras, you can basically say, I want this camera to be whatever the resolution is, 4K, 2K, and then you remember changing the focal lengths of each one individually and trying to change how you're really trying to make the camera settings match up to a real world camera. But now they have filmic options. So for each camera, you can have a different camera type. So under film back options, we can enable this particular camera. And you can see for the preset, it is 16:9 film. Well, maybe I want a 16:9 DLSR. Or if I want it to be an IMAX 70 millimeter camera, you don't have to choose, or you don't have to try and figure out what those real world cameras are, or full frame DSLR. or a very brand new one, Micro Four Thirds, very popular one. And of course, if you choose custom, you can basically just say it's whatever you want on the sensor side.
Neat. Is that for just the video, the action cams, or is that now for cameras and stuff too?
That is for all images. So let me quit media mode here. Let's just do an aerial shot. Just add a new camera. So this is for any camera.
Got it.
It is enabled right here. So which is really nifty because a lot of the times you just you want that certain effect of a particular lens style, very popular lens style. And they've also updated some bloom. You have a lot of choices between different types of flares or dirt, different types of dirt. So you can pick and choose what you want and how intense that is. You have some really intense bloom. I don't have anything that's going to showcase a whole lot of bloom.
That's always good, is being able to understand a little bit of it.
Oh, yeah. So there's a whole new range of different things that you can do. So when you choose a film back option or a different type of camera, you don't get to choose the height. You only get to choose the width of that resolution, because when you choose a particular sensor size, you're sort of locked into an aspect ratio. So you don't get to do a custom aspect ratio anymore unless you choose, if you go down in this list, choose custom, then you can go to the image size and you can choose custom. So height is determined by the film back op. You have to disable film back option, go to image, and then you can now choose whatever the output size is.
Neat.
Of course.
Great. So, so we talked about some of the placement options. We talked about some of the new video options. What else? Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on?
Yes, this is going to be really... This is one last point that's going to be really good for those who like to do some post-processing of your images or videos in, if it's Premiere Pro, After Effects, or Nuke, or Photoshop. So what we could do is say, for example, I don't want to see, I want to put something on this pad, but I don't know what it's going to be. So I'm going to select this pad, and it automatically, you see right here where it says layer ID. I'm going to enable this, and I'm going to assign what's called a render layer. So I'm going to assign this to say render layer 2. All right, so on my cameras, on any camera, let's just make a new camera of this location. All right, and it doesn't really matter that. For exporting this particular image 4, under details, we see here where it says render layers. So if I want to press the layer 2 option, I can export this as a mask. So it'll render everything in the scene, and it'll also do another render of just a black and white mask of where this plane is, so that you can then use that mask in Photoshop or whatever it is, other application, and use that to apply to. One of the key factors of this that's really good is if you just can't get, especially if you're rendering with Lumen or Path Tracer doesn't render certain things in the sky, and Lumen doesn't render certain things in the sky. So there is a sky render layer here. Let me go back to this camera, raise up a little bit. All right, so we're going to just quickly export this, but I also want to do sky and layer 2. So start export, and let's see, just real quick. Where we want to export this to. So I'm gonna select that.
While that's exporting, John in the chat keeps asking about matching camera views from your modeling software like Revit and SketchUp. My personal opinion is that I don't use camera views in Revit or SketchUp as far as like being able to match them. So I'm not sure it really affects me. I'm not sure it really affects me. So John, that's your answers. I'm not creating 3D perspective views honestly anymore in Revit. So I don't really care if I'm matching them. I'm not sure what the point would be actually in that case. So sorry, not sure if that helps, but I know you've asked a couple times, John, so I wanted to make sure we touched on it.
Sometimes you, and depending on what the application is, especially if you're going to something like I've drawn a blank. If you're going to Premiere Pro or you're wanting to match a certain camera, sometimes you want that. I personally never had a need to try and set up a camera in Revit that then matches it in Twinmotion, but I know it's being.
I would say set up. If anything, it's more important to be able to camera match from like a photo. I know that's always something. So if you're trying to Photoshop a rendering into an actual real photo, camera matching that I know is something that's always a feature. I believe actually, I think Lumion had some sort of version of a feature of that where you could bring in a photo and try to camera match it. It's obviously still challenging matching.
So right here it says it's in progress, importing an animated camera from the software. So it's currently under development.
I have to imagine with Datasmith, it's just a matter of bringing the camera from whatever view, but you'd have to somehow tell it what view. But the camera exists as an item for sure.
Yeah. So here is the full rendered image, as you would expect. But image layers, we have the mask of this particular layer, and it's also masked in the reflection
from the layer,
the car windows
of that layer, right?
Of that particular layer, yeah. But the cool one is, which I have caught myself using, is the sky. And right here, you see it's masked out the sky, and it's also added again the reflection, so that if you put something in the sky, you can then mask in the reflection on the glass. So this is really handy, especially if you wanted to do something extra in post. Yeah.
Somebody mentioned matching a drone flight. Good point, actually. I think with that new movie thing, being able to see the actual camera path and modify it means that in theory you could try and even get your cameras to match where the drone was at that moment in time. And I guess in theory you could do that even if you took a video with the video camera on the ground. If you tried to, at least that's an easier way to get to a starting point, is you can physically put the camera maybe where you took the thing. But super cool. No, I completely forgot about the rendering layer. Are there any limitations to the layers? Is it just the 4 layers or 5 layers that you saw there, or will they add as you add along? Will it add more?
I don't really know if they're going to add more. The limitation is just how many there are, is 5 right now. Of course, the more complex your scene is, and the more render layers you add, it's just going to make your render times longer, because it's got to render the full thing first, and then it's got to do a second render for each layer beyond that. So it's probably just a personal choice that's made so that you aren't trying to render something.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't imagine, I think that, like, you were showing some specific examples of why that would be valuable. I know it's not, when I first read it, I was thinking it was render channels like refraction, reflection, Z depth, that kind of stuff that you bring out of other rendering software. But I didn't realize there was more of a material ID type of layer thing, or like an object ID type of layer, which is super useful though. It is, and being able to have even just the alpha mask for the sky is something that's useful. Although I will say that the HDRI skies have come a long way, and I think they look pretty good. But if you don't get that intensity right, it can look different than like what I've noticed is the sky can look like less bright than your scene is a lot of times in order to get the right lighting type of thing. So whether that's an auto exposure thing or it's the HDRI, I'm not really sure what the reason is, but I've noticed that sometimes you need the intensity to be a certain level to make your building and your rendering look good, but then the sky might actually be too dark.
Yeah, a lot of the times I'll just make the HDRI visible and not actually projecting any light, just to get the intensity like you're talking about. And then you can do that in post.
Awesome. Cool. So with a few minutes left here, is there anything else that we missed that you wanted to bring up?
Let's see. We did sequencer, talked about the animations, render layers, material. The one last thing is that is added, if you have things like curtains or materials, there's plenty brand new material types. So with materials, there's this new little way to add materials. You hit the little tiny triangle next to standard, and you can sort between the different types of standard materials you want to add if it's your own, and it'll always be a standard. I'm going to hit this button many times and it'll be whatever that is. But in terms of actual new materials, particularly fabrics, if I wanted to, we have basically thick and thin fabrics. So here's a cotton that's thin. And what this means is here in the right panel, you can choose between standard material or thin material. What that is essentially going to do is make your materials somewhat transparent. This is a bad example without me.
Because it's double-sided, I get it.
Yeah, because it's double-sided, but
maybe if you threw a plane in there instead of a box, maybe, or something, it would probably do it, right? Or thin that up.
Well, it should. That's a bit laggy there. Here we go. This is what I want. You see how it's sort of you can see through the material? Mm-hmm. So you can assign any fabric that.
Make it like a sheer material. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much like sheer. So it's one feature that I think has been requested heavily for curtains, because getting that sort of light to pass through thin curtains is kind of tough without this feature. And the last thing is sort of a vegetation material. So I'm just or foliage material. If you have custom, if you have a custom sort of atlas card of different trees, or so if you've imported a tree of your own, you can assign a foliage material to all of the atlas cards for the leaves. And you can then choose so many different things with how they're colorized by season. You can actually control the seasons. Here it is. So force a season. We can say, here it is in the fall, but I want this season pattern to be different. And I want the life cycle of that to be different. And life cycle basically just means when it's in the winter, it dies. And in the spring, it shows. So you can bring in your own gradients of how your particular tree will basically show itself in spring versus winter.
Cool. Super neat. Awesome. Great.
Yeah, that's just some quick highlighted.
I love it. There's one quick last question from the chat, which I think we can probably both answer. From John is getting your materials to scale correctly. So I think what he's talking about is probably when you're importing from Revit. There's sort of I don't want to call it a bug, but it's just sort of a feature. If you're applying materials by drag dropping, I believe it's because the little setting on the top for bicubic material or bicubic object versus face or something. What is that on the top there?
In Twinmotion?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm going to show your screen because I'm not sharing. But I believe if you flip that to bicubic object, your materials will scale fine on your Revit objects.
So,
right?
You're right. It's still a little bit of give and take. So this symbol here means it's going to be from the UVs that Revit generates.
Right.
And Revit doesn't always generate the best UVs.
Right.
So 9 times out of 10, I will do what you're saying.
Cubic UVs. That's what I'm thinking.
Cubic UVs. You were in the ballpark.
I was just getting there. That's all memory. Yeah. I got there.
There is a bug I've noticed sometimes in Twinmotion where if you do this, it doesn't necessarily update correctly.
Yeah.
So for me to do that, I typically go to like a spherical or cylindrical UV.
And it'll actually hold it better. Oh, and then go back.
Then I go back to cubic. Yeah. And it's very important to note that a lot of the times, if you have this, depending on how you imported a Revit model, if it was by material or if it's keep hierarchy, if you do it by material, that's great. But if you have something that you want to change that is sharing that same material, you need to make sure it's to apply to object and not replace material. And a lot of the times that will replace the material of the object that you have selected and not the whole.
That's actually a great maybe place to end, because I know that's another question we get all the time is when importing, are you from Revit? So let's say we're not direct linking, we're data smithing, and we're bringing the data smith file in. Are you typically keeping hierarchy because of the flexibility, or are you coming in by material?
It really depends. 9 times out of 10, I will do a keep hierarchy just so that it comes in with everything kind of split up, and then I can choose to apply to an object way more easily. But the caveat to that is it makes the scene outliner so incredibly long.
Yeah, I know. Especially if you have multiple Revit models loaded in.
Yeah. So what I do is, that's one of the things that I was mentioning earlier, is if you just have different DataSmith files for different things, it kind of helps clean that up. And then you can do, and I also assign all of my imports in the scene graph to an import folder, so it doesn't
Yeah.
congest the entire thing.
Yeah, so and that's kind of where I was going to go to with the answer for John was it's either you assign it by cubic UVs, which is going to hit the scale fine in Twinmotion, but I have noticed that sometimes on the refresh the scale will go like to something weird. If you assign it by default, which is by imported UVs or whatever that other one is, which is the default setting. Basically find the scale factor, and I think I talked about this in some of my Twinmotion videos. You have to type it in because you can't slide it high enough usually. So find the right scale factor for the material, and it's like 15 or 20. It's usually in like the 15 to 20 range for Revit to scale it up, and then you're just scaling the materials each time you apply it to 20. Those will actually hold, right? If you refresh, for some reason, it's this is give or take. So that actually is not a Twinmotion problem. That is a Revit UV problem, which has been a Revit UVs have been a problem for decades.
Oh yeah, especially with curves.
Yeah, especially with
curves.
curves.
Okay, but curves are worse.
Yeah, so that's kind of the give or take. It's either and yeah, I've actually initially I was always for the by material because of the simplicity of the hierarchy and the fact that a lot of times that's kind of all you need on the visualization side. But more and more as I'm doing different things with it, I'm realizing that keeping hierarchy may actually be a better route. Even though it's a bigger container, a lot of stuff going on, you have so much more flexibility. And then when you start understanding, like you were saying, the replace material versus apply to object, and you understand the downfalls of replacing material, especially when it's a biomaterial import, then you can start seeing like, oh, I have a lot more flexibility, and I'm not, if I change that and I wanted to change this, I don't have to go into Revit, make a whole new family type with a new name just to load it in so that I can change the material. I'm slowly moving towards keeping hierarchy because of that reason. I think it's more flexible, even though you have this gigantic container to deal with.
List. Yeah, that's unfortunate. You can also assign within Revit. It's a little bit of an overhead, but you can assign, if you want to keep it materials and keep it a little cleaner, you can assign the same material but rename like gypsum 1, gypsum 2, gypsum 3, even though it's the same material. If you just want that control in other software, you're basically creating material IDs in Revit.
So I hope that answers your question, John. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you, Tyler. This has been great. I think everyone's enjoyed it. This has been a great conversation in the chat. I appreciate you coming on. I look forward to 2024 officially being released, but I do believe that anyone right now can go over and download the Twinmotion 2024 preview at the Epic Games launcher. So just make an Unreal account if you don't have one already. If you're Revit users, you should have already created or should always be using Twinmotion, but if you're not, it's fine. But go on over and download the 2024 preview and test it out. I'm excited for it. And Tyler, any final words before we wrap up?
Well, I'm just really happy to be on here in such a prestigious night event, and I really hope to come back again soon.
I don't know if prestigious, but I appreciate the compliment.
Well, it's a great community, and you're almost. I congratulate you on almost being to the goal of 100,000 subscribers. So that'd be excellent to get you there.
Appreciate that too. Where can people find you? Should I link them to your YouTube channel or on Twitter?
You can find me on my Twitter at 23 Mr. T-Bone. Or my YouTube channel is Design with TP, and that's where I do all my stuff.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. And I will put links to all of that below. Thank you guys for joining today here in the chat. Some awesome conversations. Remember to subscribe to the channel here on YouTube if you haven't done so already. And also to head on over to community.bimafterdark.com to check out the BIM After Dark community and hang out with me and 150, 60 other folks who are doing exactly what you're doing. And we do have an office hour tomorrow, as I mentioned before. So if you sign up now, you could probably join that. With that, have an awesome weekend, everyone, and I'll see you guys soon.